Welcome, I'm Georgie Frost. Now, climate change affects everyone. Emissions targets and sustainability ambitions have been laid out by governments across the globe, but they can't do it alone. It's vitally important that business leaders drive change within their company and industry in order to ensure that these goals are met. Well, today I have the pleasure in welcoming Josephine Bush of We Are Guernsey, whose commitment to building sustainable strategies and ESG initiatives is an example to follow. Josephine, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you just give me a quick introduction to yourself and the work at Guernsey Finance, but also your commitment, your personal commitment as well to the issue of climate change?
Well, firstly, thank you, Georgie, for having me here today. It's an absolute pleasure to take part in this. And yes, I'm a strategic advisor to Guernsey Finance, which is part of We Are Guernsey. I've been involved in the sector actually for a number of years, over 25 years actually in the green and finance sector. I was a very early adopter of the green agenda. I was a partner at EY for 14 years and helped build our renewables tax practice there and our wider practice. So I had a markets role and a client relationship role whilst at Ernst & Young. And that obviously gave me great oversight of the green market, investors, and entrepreneurs within the sector. So yeah, long-standing footprint, and that in latter years emerged into sort of more strategic thinking, ESG thinking about how businesses, asset owners, asset managers adopted ESG strategies and initiatives to help finance flow quicker to where it was needed.
Why does green and sustainable finance matter to the finance sector?
Oh, it's hugely important. If we take a step back and think about what's going on in the world, I always like to start with the science. It's very clear if you've read the latest IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, the Sixth Assessment report, about where we are as a globe. And scientifically, the scientific facts are really, really clear, and we really must listen to the scientists. They're telling us that we're on a 3 to 4 degree trajectory in terms of global warming, but we need to be at or below 1.5. The only way we get there is if we deploy finance at pace to build out more renewable generation. We attack the energy generation sector, transport sector, building sector, and also we mobilize capital to developing nations where it's needed most. So there's a huge responsibility and opportunity for the finance sector to engage with the science. The science is our signal, but finance is needed to get us where we need to be.
How useful do you think frameworks are for directing capital to the climate agenda?
I think they're hugely, hugely important from a number of perspectives. Frameworks mustn't be viewed, I think, as a sort of tick the box exercise. They're not there just for the sake of it. They're there to help all businesses garner information that's useful for investors. And when we say useful, we mean decision useful. It's hugely important that investors have the information that they need to make commercially and viable decisions. But these frameworks also help organizations develop strategies that help embed ESG initiatives and help them think long-term about the future. They can help organizations transition from where they are today to where they need to be tomorrow. So examples of that are the science-based target initiatives, the transition pathway initiatives, which are really frameworks that are designed to a sort of stepped program, if you like, that help organizations decarbonize. But we've got, the task force for climate-related financial disclosures. That's a reporting framework that looks at governance, risk, and other KPIs that help organizations deliver the information that's decision useful for investors. So those organizations that are embracing frameworks will attract capital, and that in itself will have an impact on valuations, cost of capital, and deliver returns and value in other ways.
Josephine, I want to talk to you about financial innovation. Firstly, how do you understand the term financial innovation? How important is it? And what are some of the innovative financial structures that can help combat the climate crisis?
It's a great question. We do need financial innovation, if I could say that in its sort of broadest sense. We know that there's capital there to be deployed into the green sector, but how we accelerate it at pace is the question. We need to understand the risks in the market in order to develop financial structures, new financial instruments that deploy capital to where it needs to be. So if we start with that, if we look at risk and how we assess risk, it is a great starting point. Clearly, wherever there's innovation, wherever there's the development of new technologies, wherever we're trying to unleash the potential of capital, risk is a huge factor within that, and de-risking those opportunities is part of the financial innovation pathway. So I think that we need very clear public signals and public-private partnerships that help de-risk finance in order that we can accelerate capital to where it needs to be. So part of the starting point for this will be very clear public signals about where it wants finance to go, particularly at the innovation end of the market. And that can be government providing guarantees, it can be new financial instruments where there's government involvement and partnership with the private sector. It can be tax incentives or tax holidays that help entrepreneurs and private finance find its way to innovation. So we definitely need very strong signals from government in order to help support financial sort of innovation. But I think marrying that with assessments of risk and how we de-risk will be critical.
How is Guernsey working to mobilise capital?
Guernsey's been doing a huge amount already. They were very early adopters of the green agenda and very quick to be first movers in creating frameworks, in engaging with all financial market participants. They have initiated the first green regulated fund. They've got a kite mark that enables green funds to assert their green credentials, and there's eligibility criteria in order to qualify for that. They've established an ESG framework for the insurance industry. I mean, we talked about frameworks earlier, but the ESG framework is highly accessible. It's designed to be that first step the insurance industry can take to assure alignment to ESG, good citizenship, if you like. They had a sustainable finance week this week, where a huge part of that was about understanding where private capital could and private wealth could make a difference within the green sector, because Guernsey recognised that of the trillions of dollars that are required to mobilise towards the green sector, private wealth is a huge part of that. So family office, high net worths, ultra high net worths, as well as institutional investment are all pools of capital that need to be accessed and mobilised towards the green agenda. So Guernsey recognised this very early on, and they've been providing a lot of thought leadership, a lot of support to different segments of the financial community in order to raise awareness, education, in order to help connect capital with opportunity. So it's a hugely important initiative for Guernsey, and they recognise with that first mover advantage that they've had that they've got a real opportunity to leverage that and really put themselves on the map. It's a small island nation, but has a disproportionate impact within this sector.
What available new technologies can we use to help tackle climate change?
Well, there's a huge amount of innovation that's going on that's the public will be very aware of, but there's also a huge amount of innovation, I think, that goes on behind the scenes. We're seeing innovation across our supply chains to deploy capital into offshore wind, for instance, the hydrogen market. I talk about the supply chain because that's hugely important to the UK economy. We know in the government's 10-point plan that offshore wind and hydrogen and carbon capture are a part of that. But we do need to make sure that we've got access to everything that's required in order to bring into being those projects. So hence the supply chain. There's a huge amount of innovation sort of going on there. So that's new technologies to generate a greener energy system and capture carbon if emitted. But there's also, I think, innovation that's going on to develop products for the future that don't yet exist. Our universities and entrepreneurial community are hugely important to that. And I think they're sort of unsung heroes in many respects within this landscape. There's a huge amount that comes from that community. So funding that community actually is critical to develop the technologies of tomorrow that don't yet exist.
To conclude then, Josephine, if you could ask those working in finance for some ideas on how they can pursue sustainable finance, what would you ask the audience to do?
I think there's a huge amount that can be done on a collaborative basis. I think as a professional service community, as a finance community, the power of collaboration will take us a long way. In order to innovate around finance, we need to move outside of our traditional ways of thinking and our traditional ways of operating. So financial solutions will come from governments, regulators, and financial institutions, civil society, entrepreneurs, NGOs, working together. We know what the problem is. The science is telling us very clearly what the problem is. No one part of our economy can provide the solution on their own. So my biggest plea would be to be very open-minded and to believe in the power of collaboration and to reach out and work together to find solutions. COP26 is a huge opportunity for us as a nation to do that. I think Guernsey actually are a great example of that. I think they recognize the unique social capability to galvanize multidisciplinary resource to provide solutions. And that's hugely important, I think, to accelerating capital, but also to providing solutions for the climate change sort of problem. I think the development of frameworks is also critical. We need to have frameworks that are adopted universally so that investors can trust the information that they're being given and can make comparisons, can ensure that there's consistency and that the information that they're getting is commercial. It's not just decision useful, but it's commercially useful. It gives them great access and understanding of where a business is in its life cycle. That's really useful information because it's not just a snapshot in time. It's about understanding where the business is now, but where it will be in the future. And that will really help capital flow.
Josephine Bush, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.